on a eu l'idée cette année d'essayer de faire le lien entre des choses qui a priori existent, qui sont structurées de part et d'autre, mais qui n'ont à peu près rien à voir en termes d'approche disciplinaire, de structuration des savoirs, de structuration des pratiques, mais avec au milieu les enjeux liés à la ville durable, et donc bien sûr aussi liés à l'objet même de l'université Gustave Eiffel. Et donc nous avons pour cette deuxième partie de la matinée avoir un échange, je dirais, entre les propos et la lecture aussi des enjeux de la ville dans l'histoire et de l'histoire de Patrick Boucheron, avec Eeva Furman, qui vient d'Helsinki et qui est co-auteur d'un gros rapport qui s'appelle Global Sustainable Development Report, la première édition de ce rapport, dans le cadre d'un groupe d'experts, de 15 experts internationaux, mandatés par le secrétaire général des Nations Unies, pas en général, et qui a été publié au mois de septembre dernier, et qui fait un peu le point de façon transversale sur à la fois l'avancée des objectifs de développement durable et surtout tous les liens systémiques ou pas, les interactions, les boucles de retour, les points de blocage entre les 17 objectifs de développement durable, sans considérer que c'est un cadre, c'est pas les 10 commandements non plus du développement durable, c'est un cadre de travail, et l'ensemble des cibles et sous-cibles qui y sont liées. Et puis, je remercie aussi Karine Salovkos d'avoir accepté de prendre part à la discussion qui suivra. Donc, on aura l'angle développement durable, l'angle, si j'ose dire, historique, et puis le témoignage d'un acteur urbain opérationnel engagé dans la mise en œuvre des politiques publiques. De façon à continuer à poser le décor, je propose à Eeva Furman de nous présenter en quelques minutes justement les grandes conclusions de ce rapport, un exercice auquel elle se livre de manière, j'allais dire, presque quotidienne depuis la parution du rapport au mois de septembre, avec un agenda extrêmement chargé. Je remercie d'autant plus d'avoir accepté de venir nous rejoindre. Elle était déjà à Paris, à invitation de l'IRSTEA au début du mois de novembre. On continue l'exploration des conclusions de ce rapport. Je pense que ce sera vraiment un matériau très utile aussi dans la suite pour la préparation des prochaines échéances de Gustave Eiffel. Donc Eeva, je vous laisse le micro et ensuite nous échangerons ensemble avec Patrick Boucheron et avec Karine Salovkos. Merci.
Yes, thank you very much for this invitation, and I'm sorry I'm going to speak in English, and I hope my voice lasts because I'm having a Christmas cold, but what can you do? I have a crazy habit of going running in the morning before I do anything else. I go when the moon is still up, and sometimes I see the full moon. And then I get this crazy idea. I'm thinking that, what about if I would be running on the moon and looking down, and maybe I could see something beautiful like this. And then I remember all the pictures that we have seen, how the forests have been burning. A couple of years ago they were, and also already in the 90s, there were this astronaut that started sending pictures. And then I remember all the riots that we are having now, and I think they all link to the same thing, very much about the injustice and challenges that we are having in the world, what the youngs do, what they do in South America, in Middle East, in Europe, in Paris, in Hong Kong, and so forth. So I've been thinking very much, why don't we just kick this ball and get the vicious circles turned to some virtuous circles and make the world better? And I think someone else had thought about that before me already, because the United Nations built the Sustainable Development Agenda, the Agenda 2030, which is built of 17 goals. And those goals are not only the environmental ones, it's all about poverty and health and food and cities and gender equality and equality between people and so forth, but also the environment. And that's now in our hands, and there is actually difficult decisions to be made, because this is not the first time something global that has been decided. The easy solutions have been made, and now we are closer to big challenges and more expensive ones, and we really have to make them done. And I'm going to talk today, as I was asked, to talk about the education, science, and action. And so what do we know about the situation today? We know firstly that this has happened a lot since 2015 when the goals were accepted. And now I don't say it only because you are from cities and business, but those are the two communities that have made the most progress since 2015, I would say. But there is a lot of challenges because not much progress have been made, even though lots of action has taken place. And the problem is that actually for many of these we are still going backwards, and this is really a big challenge. Some of you may recognize this picture that really shows that actually since I was born, the development among countries have become much more equal. We had lots of countries where there were huge problems in monetary terms, which then reflected also other issues, like here is the number of babies in families. And so in 2017 it looked like this. But what have been the price of it is actually that the climate change has increased, and the biodiversity loss is really, that is connected to our well-being, is really growing as well. But there is another issue, and that is the equality within countries, but also lately it has started to increase again between countries. But within countries, whether you take a developing country or a developed country, you can see that. And the challenge is that this is not only a question of ethics, it's also a question of practical and for our benefit, because we need to get with growing inequalities, we are going to come to a situation where sustainable economic growth is not possible anymore. And this is due to the fact that the inequality is not only monetary, it's also social, but especially political. Who has the right to make decisions? So the United Nations were quite lost, because this is of course a huge and complex issue, the whole agenda, to get some scientific understanding to the different countries what they should really do. And so this report was asked by the group that I've been part of in 2016, and now we got it ready and gave it to the presidents in September. And the major point in what's the situation is that, as I mentioned, some are still going to the negative direction. The problem is that when these are going to the negative direction, the whole agenda is not able to proceed, because we have really high connections. And now I show how we build that on knowledge. We know from scientific articles not that much about the interlinkages between the different SDGs, because there is lots of white in this picture. So on the x-axis and y-axis you have all the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the white shows that there isn't scientific understanding of those. We went through more than 100 different global reports. But if you take some and see the round, you can see that actually you can get co-benefits by dealing with several at the same time. That's the blue color. And they are much more blue than red. But the red is the worrying one. That's the one where you get the conflicting ideas. So if you enhance one goal, you actually hinder the other one to make any progress. And so you need to you have to be aware of these potential conflicts and deal with the trade-offs early on and not when it's in the hands. The second one that is really, we all know globalization has always existed. When I was young, we discussed should the globalization be stopped or not. Today it's just a fact. But the thing that has happened during the last 20 years is that it has proceeded really fast, and we have not been able to deal with these flows in a systematic way, in such a way that the benefits and the losses would be divided more equally. And then the third issue is that both these challenges as well as the solutions are made by several actors, not only by policymakers, but by several actors. And to be aware of these actors is really important. Here is a slide that shows revenues. What's the monetary winning that you get within 1 year? And you can see that there are lots of countries, but there are also lots of multinational companies, and there are lots of companies that get their revenue from oil business, which is in a way contradictory with the agenda and with the environmental targets that we are having. And these are the winners, and of course the winners would be losers if we push it too fast, and that's at least in some of their understanding, and that causes the friction why we don't go forward. But we also have the losers. Here you can see some of the pictures, some might be even from Paris. And the thing is that, as I said, it's an ethical issue, but it's also something that comes into the hands of everyone. We have migration from countries where you have conflicts. We have people losing their lives because of some policies, and we really need to deal with these issues before they come into our hands. Or we don't want to build fences. We can build fences on our houses and our countries, but we can't build fences on the air emissions that are and the climate change gases. So the way forward that this report suggests is that actually we don't forget the SDGs, which are the 17, but we take a practical way how to deal with them when we implement it. And we came up to the conclusion that we can actually push the societies into sustainable development, and it's totally possible if we deal with these 6 major systems in our societies. And all of these are actually interlinked with these different SDGs. So if we take, for example, food, and you go to a country where water is not a problem, suddenly the water becomes a problem because we, for example, in Finland, we don't have big water problem, but we are buying a lot of tomatoes from Spain and other places, and they are using lots of water, and the people in these countries are then having positive or negative impacts due to our eating the wonderful tomatoes in Finland in winter. So we see that there is the human well-being and capabilities, sustainable and just economies, very much connected to production and consumption patterns, sustainable food systems and healthy nutrition, energy decarbonization, and also universal access to energy. We have lots of people that don't, there's 850 million people without electricity and some 3-4 billion people without clean energy. Sustainable urban and peri-urban development, even though I mentioned that this is the area where there are these forerunners like Paris, maybe, we still have the majority of cities growing really chaotically and causing lots of problems. And then the securing the global environmental commons, which is the basis of it. How can we agree how we deal with these things that are around the world? How can we get into agreement on those, because that's the basis of all the others. And the way that we push this in our societies, what we suggest is that we use governance, which is like policies, economy and finance, which is very much also investments, the individual behavioral change and the collective action and active citizenship, and then science and technology. But not take these as single ones. They need to push the society in the same direction, and they need to support each other, so that we need policies that make individuals able to do their behavioral change, and we need science that actually makes the, for example, the investors aware where they should push their or put their investments. So we come up with this kind of framework for it, and depending if we are in France or Finland or in Madagascar, we use the levers on the left-hand side in a different way. We made a different kind of combination of them, because we have different challenges. So my point have been that we can't really solve single solutions or use the methods for single solutions by solving these wicked problems. And wicked problems are the ones that are really challenging ones. So now I move on and say why we need actually this value chain from education to research to knowledge to learning and then to action. And I'll start with the education. And education, of course, we do need more education and education for everyone, and that has been the situation that we have made much advancement. But the education has to be a good quality one, and here we see big differences, especially when we are thinking about sustainable development. But as a whole, in developing countries, the level of the education is often very poor. This links very much the education to all the 6 entry points, and we need to push that. The important place is actually the childhood, and especially the early stages of childhood before you enter the school. This was one of the solutions or the messages that we have in the report, because that's the phase when our cognitive, socio-emotional and action competencies, but also attitudes and values are developed. And that happens already during the pregnancy, believe it or not. Chinese children are crying with a different accent than the European ones. And this is because of they are really catching up something. But we need the lifelong learning as well. So nutrition, health, social factors are all part of what should happen in our early childhood, and especially the connection to nature is very important. It's not only for our mental ideas and mental health, but it's also our physical health. We need for our immunology. So it's beneficial to have green in the cities, and it helps our brain development for the rest of the life. But we also need to develop or provide people with skills for this technology development, and actually workers need different kind of skills because the development at the moment is so fast, and we need to enhance the eco-literacy of citizens. So today we are teaching very much in the way, let's say here in developed countries, where we focus on this conceptual thinking, and that is of course very important. But we also look very much on the numerical kind of targets in learning or in schools, how the learning happens. And our system is very much focusing on developing students that are able actually to develop this economic growth. But when we are thinking about sustainable development, we have lots of other things that we need to teach to our children so that they learn these. And they are the understandings of this connection to the nature. And this is not any hippie style, it is really hard stuff. It's the systemic thinking, which isn't so easy either. And understanding how the local problems can be solved. So, for example, in Finland, I think a child needs to understand or learn how to find solutions, how not to go and shop new clothes all the time. When a child in a developing country have to find a way, learn how to cope with solutions when suddenly comes a big storm and takes everything from the city. And you need to, in a way, be able to make solutions. That's the critical thing. And that's linked with the critical thinking, and then also recognizing that peace is actually not something self-clear, it's something very valuable and something very sensitive. That when do we change, what's the benefit of this all? And this is very much linked with empathy, and also that will our social skills. So resilience is something that we all need to be able to live in this changing world. We face different kind of challenges to our everyday life, and so the resilience might mean different things. But when we teach children, we need to develop that they have a positive attitude to environment and to life already from the very beginning, and provide them the high quality formal but also non-formal education. And non-formal education is something that happens in families, on the streets, and in our communities. And then ensuring the lifelong learning. And so we can develop a kind of plan where we need on different levels be educated but also to learn, because education does not always lead to learning. So we need the different levels of learning. And there is still a huge gap from learning to actually acting. And this is the thing that so often is forgotten, that you really need other tools for that. And I will come back to that later. First, I take a few points about research. I mentioned the wicked problems. And the wicked problems means that they are problems where we don't have 100% knowledge about the problem and how it can be solved, and that the society does not really agree on the solutions, neither on the problems. On the right-hand side, you can see what they are, but these are typical when we are talking about sustainability. And as I said, we should not, in a way, fool ourselves and solve these wicked problems with the methods that we have used when we are solving other kind of issues that are also important. So the group that was writing the report, the Global Sustainable Development Report, we also wrote a paper to Nature Sustainability that came out exactly the same day as the report was given to the presidents. And there we really emphasized the role of new type of research that we are needing for sustainable development. We of course need all kinds of research, but to be able to make our societies thrive, we need something else. So we need to analyze these interactions that I started with. And there we need all disciplines to contribute, to understand those. But we also need to understand the issue of power. Who has the power, how it's used, and how could we actually collaborate with those with power and build a better sort of common understanding. And this leads us then to the third point, which is the co-creation and of the transformations towards the future. And this is very much working with cities and working with other actors. So this is just final recommendations from the report. We need to harness the existing research that we have already. There's lots of research around, and we need to take that into use. And so we have IPCC and IPBS and the reports for the climate change and biodiversity, and like this report. And they should actually give signals to the same direction so that the decision makers are not getting lost. And we also need other kind of platforms and forms to discuss with the decision makers, which are much broader than only the policy makers, and find new ways how actually researchers could collaborate with different actors. This graph shows that science is very much focused only to the developed countries. OECD countries, we have 3,500 researchers per million people. When again in the developing countries, we have only 75 per million people. And for example, Africa contributes with 2% to the science articles done worldwide. So this is really a problem when we are trying to find ways to change these flows. The different big systemic transformations, as I explained, they go much beyond Europe or Paris or even France. So we need really to support and build the science capacity in the developing countries in a more equal terms, so that we have partners there to collaborate. And this requires the open access. It requires that they develop their own curricula and education system and scientific funding, but also us collaborating with them. And finally, there is the gap in science. 60% of science today is funded by private enterprises. And this is not necessarily a bad thing, but the enterprises want the results to support their activities. And so it doesn't really help when we are talking about systems. So we need to discuss with these enterprises, but also increase the public funding. Okay. It came back. So for this, we really need to develop platforms that are science-based in our countries, expert platforms on sustainable development, sustainability science, what now Gustav Eiffel is very much going to focus on. I'm really impressed by the work that is happening here. I close up with these experimentations because experiment labs that I have heard here as well are really crucial. It's the new generation science policy. There you work with the actors, with the children, and with the businesses and so forth. And I just show a couple of what we have been doing. Here we work with, it's a Nature Step project. We work with daycares in second biggest city in Finland, the Espoo city, and we are working with the kids and with the teachers in the daycares and finding ways how to deal with food waste, how to be in nature, how to grow your food, and also provide information about respect and even conceptual learning. The second one is something we work with schools, and here again we work with cities, because cities in Finland are providing the food to schools. In Finland we have a great innovation from 1960s or 50s already, where we have give free food, warm food, for every child for 9 years. So that's a huge number of meals. And now we have recommendations in Finland that we should have more sustainable food, which means less animal protein food. It's a great challenge to these kitchens. It's a great challenge for the schools, for the legislation builders, but it is also a great challenge for the children. Well, I don't know if it's a problem for the parents or for the kitchens, because the kids, they go to McDonald's if they don't get what they want. That's the quality of or the standard of living nowadays. So we are working with actually the kids and developing recipes that they like. We give them possibilities to taste different non-animal proteins and so forth. And then the final project that I show is Just Food, which tells about food, where we discuss with those who are the losers in this transformation in the food sector, in the food system. So I close here, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you.